Hello and welcome back to my first video in forever. I think it's been over a year at this point. We'll see if I can stick around and start uploading consistently again. Anyways, I wanted to start a new video series. The idea of this series is to basically take like pre-existing themes that exist in the world of film music and sort of transform their genre. I was mainly inspired from the recent series on the Audio Imperia YouTube channel where they're taking themes and writing them in the style of like another composer, and that is really cool. And I thought about trying to do something similar myself, but I'm not quite sure I'm that skilled yet. So my idea was to basically take existing themes and do something I think I'm a little bit more confident in doing and try to transform them into a different genre. So today I'm going to start with the Chairman's Waltz from Memoirs of a Geisha by John Williams. I basically grabbed a piano sheet music book and just copied it into Midi, and then basically gave myself the task of transforming this into a new genre. So this is a waltz. It's in 3/4. It's sort of moderate tempo. In minor, it's a very sort of traditional, like sad, John Williams-y sad waltz theme. And what I did is I wrote down something like 12 different genres, and then I went on Google and did a random number generator, and I got whatever number I got, and that number was assigned to moderate intensity action. I think of moderate intensity action as sort of like sequence where there's like a montage of the two sides that are about to fight getting ready to fight. It's like we're clearly signaling to the audience that action is coming, but we're not actually fighting yet. Hopefully when I play what I made, that'll make a little bit more sense. But that was the goal. So the first thing, listen to the theme in its sort of basic piano MIDI form. So let's listen to this John Williams theme. Okay, so that gives you an idea of what we're working with here. You can see we're just hanging around on E minor, not really going much of anywhere. I think one of the cool things about just sort of copying the MIDI over from like a beginner piano book is that I'm not going to end up getting too much information. It's going to force me to sort of do some original composing. And then one of the things that's interesting about this piece, at least in the way it's written in this version, is harmonically, it's like really, kind of boring. It just sticks around on E minor. Sometimes there's a reference to B major, that major 5, with the D sharp, but it's in E minor, it's in 3/4. So transferring it to moderate intensity action, the first thing I knew I was going to need to do was I wanted to get away from 3/4. I wanted to totally like escape the waltz feeling. I just didn't want to fall into a trap of writing something that sounded like it was just like an up-tempo waltz. So I moved to 4/4. I ended up shifting it down to the one and only D minor, just not because it's D minor, but because it just worked better for the ranges of the instruments when I got to the orchestrating stage. And then I knew I wanted to add some more harmony. So what I ended up doing was basically taking the melody, copying it note for note, just extending some of the notes to make it fit in 4/4, bumping the tempo up to 95 BPM, and adding some chords underneath it, and then trying to follow this sort of intro where I basically copy and pasted this sort of arpeggiation right here, note for note, just made it fit within the 4/4 feeling that I had, and then used that as like an 8-bar intro, and wanted to have just sort of like a piano, some sort of like high pedal tone in the string, that sort of like intro, building up the intensity feeling. And then I went in and added some chords underneath. So let's hop on over to the piano sketch of what things look like as I transformed this into a moderate intensity action sketch. Okay, so the notes I've got highlighted in blue here just to follow from the original are notes that I think of as basically being exact copy and pastes. Not exact because I moved it to 4/4, but stuff that I got directly from the original. What's interesting about this is that even though it's in minor and even though the notes from the melody are basically the exact same, I don't think it's super notable at all that this is basically a ripoff of that theme. So something that's kind of interesting. But if Memoirs of a Geisha needed a moderate intensity action sequence, I'm not sure it does. I haven't seen the film, but this could be something where as a composer, we could sort of sneak in something that maybe feels like it fits because it's got the same thematic material, even though it's like completely different in feeling. So the beginning, I basically just copied, and instead of it being that sort of 3/4 waltzy bounce, I just turned it into a 4/4, that alternating sort of marching feeling that you get in 4/4. And then I took the ARP you can see here, this sort of falling pattern, kept that exactly the same. Knew I wanted to keep that in the intro. And then as we got over into the theme, these notes, I mean, they're down in D minor now, but it's an exact copy paste of the theme. And then what I needed to do was go in and add some harmony underneath. So the new parts are what I've got in green here. This is the harmony that I went in and added. This is mostly sticking around D minor, although you'll notice there is some use of the sharp 4. There is also major 6. Instead of this being B flat, I do have the B natural at times. And I do have the B flat as well. So, I mean, one of the cool things about moderate intensity action and just sort of action sequences in general, you can use dissonant harmony without really needing to justify it a ton, particularly if it's going to be just chugging along in like some sort of ostinato. It's really, the harmony can be pretty flexible and the harmonic function can be pretty flexible. So I'm trying to stick around D and the bass as closely as I can. And this is the chord progression that basically I ended up coming up with. So let me play this new theme now with the chord progression under it. And I'm going to just sort of play it in here using this pattern that I copy and pasted from the intro, just so you can hear what this transition sounds like. So you're going to be able to see here that definitely the change in harmony like changes the feel of this entirely, but there's hopefully enough there that I can claim that I sort of followed my original task of taking this and transforming it into something different. So there's enough of the original theme there because it literally is the same note for note that I feel like I can get away with it. But you also notice like we're at 95-ish BPM here, and there's only a chord change for the most part every 2 bars. So the harmonic rhythm is relatively slow, which keeps this at a nice sort of moderate intensity. What gives it an action sequence is coming in and adding an ostinato. So now with the ostinato pattern, and I've got this sort of interesting thing playing around and that gets moved to the violas eventually. That kind of plays every other bar to give it some added momentum and drive. But now with the ostinato, let's just take a listen to what this sounds like. Yeah, so that's basically where I ended up with the sketch. And then from there, it was just a matter of orchestrating. So when it came to the intro, I mean, I think that the interesting thing basically was that I left the descending line still in the piano and added just like a sort of high string sound from Albion Tundra. There's this air and ice tratto patch from Albion Tundra. Albion Tundra has lots of cool sounds that I like to use as just sort of that high pedal tone. They've got all sorts of like weird, interesting techniques that are kind of like tremolos, sound a little bit different. And because they're played with motion in them, they give the piece a sense of life that you wouldn't necessarily get. So let me just play that with the piano. So that basically is what makes up the bulk of the intro, added in some harp. But then the majority of the orchestration comes in this sort of main thematic section. And the bulk of what's making this interesting really is the string ostinato. So let me grab all the MIDI from the string ostinato and just listen to what this sounds like. gives you an idea. You could hear there that I did have for that part in the melody where it jumps up a fifth and gets a little high in the register. The majority of the melody I've got being played by four horns, but I put those in the violins just because I thought that both the change in color and also the change in register, just it worked to keep the piece of music a little bit more interesting. So if I play the melody, I mean, it's really quite simple. I just copy and pasted it mostly, like I said, into horns and then that one bit in violins, but I'll pull up the MIDI and just play the melody. So that gives you the basic idea. One other cool thing that I just wanted to throw in there that I added was I took that sort of descending line and I knew I wanted to use it again. I wanted to reference as much of the original as I could. And after the first four bars is a transition into the sort of second half of this stating of this theme. To use as a sort of transition, I basically took that and altered the notes a little bit. So I used what did I use? I used marimba and alto flute, and the two of them combined to create this sound. Kind of cool. And in context, it's subtle. It sort of hides there in the background, but I think gives the piece a little bit of extra life and momentum, which helps keep it moving forward. And then the other big thing that I've got the trombones doing the very film scoring thing of just doing crescendo, diminuendo just on the chords. So I can pull up the piano roll and just play one or two of those, but you get an idea. This is like one of the most standard film scoring orchestration things imaginable. You get the idea. As the second half of this theme in this 8-bar phrase, which I guess is now a 16-bar phrase, but really it's an 8-bar phrase, I did mute some of the instruments. I wanted to draw back the orchestration a little bit. I think there's always a temptation to just add. And if you want the final iteration, like the final chord, to be this big hit, then sometimes one of the best things you can do is instead of continuing to add, our ears sort of get used to that, and each addition sort of brings with it a little bit less weight, I find. Like when you start with one instrument and add a second, that does a ton. You get up to a point of diminishing returns. Finding places in your music where you can draw back is going to do a lot for creating a sense of bigness and largeness. So try when you can to find moments in the music where it makes sense to draw back and remove some instruments. Just an orchestration tip that I found really useful. So then as we get into the outro, I wanted to do something that is ended a little bit darker. I'm imagining that something tense is happening in the films, whatever film this is, imaginary film, and that maybe it looks like the bad guys are about to do something. They've got some plan that looks like it's about to work or something. Anyways, there's a focus in clearly on something dark. That's just where I went with the piece. Once again, I just took the theme, copy and pasted it, sort of made it match with 4/4, and then added some stringed pedal tones and also some string tremolos, along with this cool piece of sound design, which I think is really common in film scoring. But basically, I want to play that on its own, which is to take the crowtails. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I don't know if it's crowtails or crotales, but you take like a bowed patch and then you tune it way down and send it through some reverb, and you get this really cool sort of droney thing that fits really well with other orchestral instruments. So let me just give you a play, and I added some OTT to it because, of course, as to what this sounds like, because I think this is one of those cool things from the outro that really gives this piece a sort of nice tense ending. So you can hear that's nice and quiet. I layered that with the sort of falling piano line, and then also took the remainder of the melody from the original piano sketch and threw it in alto flute, like I said. But that's basically most of the piece. That's how I got from something that started as a waltz into a piece of moderate intensity action. So without further ado, let's give the full piece a listen. So that is what I came up with. I hope you found that interesting, and it was really, really fun, and I'm looking forward to doing more of these in the future. So if you have any questions or anything you wanted to share, please feel free to leave a comment or like the video and all that good YouTube stuff. Anyways, until next time, I will catch you all later. Take care.